Hello, Louis from Spitfire Audio here. I'm here to show you a little piece of music I've written using our libraries as part of our Black Weekend collection. Now, our Black Weekend offers are exclusively available until the 3rd of December, with over 40% off of products within the Black Weekend collection and 25% off of individual products. But of course, you'll get the biggest savings with bundles and collections. The three libraries included in our Black Weekend collection are Solo Strings, Chamber Strings, and Ólafur Arnalds Chamber Evolutions. However, by purchasing this collection, you'll also be able to get our phenomenal Aperture Strings library for free on top of that. So here's a piece of music I've written using the Black Weekend collection libraries, including Aperture Strings and a little bit of the Labs piano. One of the joys of being the newest addition to the composing team is that I get to discover these libraries as I'm writing demos for Spitfire with them. And Ólafur Arnalds Chamber Evolution is one of them. So it's my first time using it and it's just phenomenal. Now, with most string libraries, you'd want to focus on the programming, whether that be automating the dynamics or expression. However, with this one, you can just play a chord and it sounds marvelous. So let me show you what I mean. So with this patch, you get these beautiful waves, which I've used at the start and the end of my piece. So in this library, you get 4 patches: chamber waves, chamber grid, and basses waves and basses grid. So the waves patches are like what you've just heard, these beautiful string sounds swelling in and out. And I've also used some bass waves at the start and end as well. If we look at the chamber waves UI, you can see there's a selection of microphones for you to customize your own mix, as well as a set of parameters for you to control. In the articulations, you're able to control the length of the waves, as well as other sounding waves like tremolos and vibrato. I've also snuck in a little bit of the chamber grid during our climactic section of the piece. For those of you that are familiar with our Evolutions libraries, you get a grid that looks like this, and you've got our key centers on one side and the types of evolution on the other, as well as mic mixes and other parameters. At the top here, there's a randomize feature for you to completely randomize which evolutions are pegged into which key centers. And you can also sort that by the evolutions category. So myself, I went with the subtle evolutions, as that's the direction I wanted to go for the sound in this piece. But there's also thrills, episodic, and dissonant evolutions as well. And here's how the evolutions I've used sound. So like with most of our evolutions libraries, it adds a really nice texture to help give your piece a bit of flavor. Moving on, I'm using our wonderful Aperture Strings library, which again is only available until December the 3rd. So make sure you grab it, as this won't be available again and you don't want to miss it. So here I'm using the Refractions patch, which provides these really nice shimmery harmonics, which sound like this. It's absolutely wonderful, and it works so well with the Ólafur Arnalds Chamber Evolutions chamber waves, as both of them swelling in and out provide these really, really rich and lovely textures. Taking a look at the piano roll here, you can see the refractions patch in the session kind of ends very similarly to how it began, wrapping the piece up really nicely. I've also used the Aperture Strings ensemble patch, which is the main patch that comes with the library. There's also a pinhole ensemble patch, which is a new set of recordings of a very small amount of string players playing really quietly. So in the Aperture ensemble patch, you've got a very nice selection of articulations. I'm using the flautando, and I'm using it with the Ólafur Arnalds chamber waves just to help drag out that last chord as we wrap up the piece. So the way the library works is you're able to control the amount of string players in a section using the dynamic fader. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate that for you with the flautando patch. What's really cool as well is the little camera design that opens up as you open up the string section by turning up the dynamic fader. Now, solo strings is a go-to when writing solo string melodies. Now, I'm using the violin total performance legato patch, as well as our new cello total performance legato patch. Now, for those that aren't familiar with what a legato patch is, it basically allows for a lot smoother and more realistic transitions between notes, which is why it works perfectly for solo melody lines. So as well as automating dynamics, vibrato, and expression, you'd want to program the velocity as well, as playing at a lower velocity allows for a lot slower and more smoother transitions, whereas a higher velocity will allow for more direct transitions. So let me show you how I've used a lower velocity to get some really nice slide transitions between notes. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of sixth intervals, so I try and place them in my compositions where I can. Now I'm using one more track with solo strings, and taking a quick look at the chamber strings, you can see I'm writing with a lot of shorts, whether that's spiccato or pizzicato. However, I wanted this pizzicato line to stand out a little bit more from the string section. So with this line, I'm mostly playing thirds, sounding something like this. And still playing thirds in other sections like this. Leading into a nice bridge section, building up before we get into the climactic section of the piece. I'll go ahead and show you the chords I'm playing for this bit. So we start with an A flat 5. Adding a B makes that a minor. Adding the C makes it major. Before shifting up to a C7. The C7 gives off an almost A-flat augmented quality to the piece, helping the harmony of that whole section ascend into our climactic section, which is mainly played on an F minor. And the climactic section sounds something like this. Before I get onto the chamber strings, I do want to quickly touch on the Lab soft piano, as it plays mostly a supporting role to some of our other lines. Opening up the piano roll, you can see it mainly plays thirds, supporting that viola pizzicato in the solo strings. And as we move on here, you can kind of see that F minor pattern during the climactic section, and it also plays a sort of rhythmical role in the left hand. Now onto our lovely chamber string section, we begin with the basses playing spiccato, supported by the cello playing pizzicato. And about halfway through the piece, there's a really good section where both of these are supporting each other well and working really nicely together. So I'll go ahead and solo that out for you. I'm also using a low string switasto patch, and it sort of acts like a kind of bass line, so it sounds like this. It's worth noting that I'm just using a tree mic for this patch, and that's the great thing about these libraries. A lot of them come with a variety of mics for you to customize your mic mix. For example, with the Solo Strings Violin Total Performance patch, I've created my own mix using the ambient mic and a little bit of close. And you can also create an easier mix by adjusting the slider here, deciding how close or far you want the sound to be. With the Solo Strings Viola Pizzicato track, I used a combination of both tree and close mics. It's also worth noting the large amount of articulations within this patch. There's about 3 types of pizzicato. I'm using the standard one, but you've also got Bartok and mandolin pits. Now, speaking of violas, we've got one final track to look at, and that's the Viola Spiccato track in the chamber strings. Now, I've programmed this one slightly differently than I'm used to by clicking on the spanner here and turning on CC mapped velocity. Now, what that does is instead of me being able to control the velocity by how hard I hit it, I can actually control it by automating the dynamics fader and creating some really cool fades, which I've used in this piece. Now I'm going to solo out our chamber strings viola so you can hear some of the flourishes, along with our lab soft piano, and I'll also add on our solo strings viola, as both of our violas are playing the same thing during the climactic section. And that about does it. As I said, there's over 40% off for these 3 libraries as part of our Black Weekend collection. Enjoy the libraries and thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.